Yeah, welcome to part 2 of a brand new series called The Most Powerful Black Man of the Last 500 Years, where we discuss life during the reign of King Henri Christophe, Commander-in-Chief of Northern Haiti from 1802 to 1820 until his death. In part 1, we discuss his origins, we discuss his rise to power. We also discuss how he established his government in the North, and we also discuss the men that he surrounded himself within his government in the North. In part 2, let's get into it. Within a few months of his coronation, Christophe issued the Code Henri, a comprehensive series of laws regulating commerce, civil proceedings, the police, agriculture, and the military. The Code Rural, however, was in many ways the most original part of the Code Henri. While Christophe had a precedent in the policies enforced by Toussaint, nevertheless, his formal codification of the rules and regulations concerning agriculture represents a new venture in statecraft. This code covers such diverse matters as the duties of plantation owners and the laborers, the policies of plantations, and the cultivation of the major crops. Sir Joseph Banks once said, "It is worthy to be written in letters of gold. Nothing that I ever seen, which was written for the same purposes by white men, is worthy to be compared to it." The following hours of labor are established. Work shall commence with the daylight and be continued till 8 o'clock. 1 hour is allotted to the workers for breakfast and 2 hours for rest. There were provisions given for medical care and for the protection of the workers against exploitation. Evening prayers were required, marriage was encouraged, and it was decreed that the peasantry, who shall bring up the greatest number of legitimate children in a reputable manner, shall be distinguished and encouraged by the government itself. Christophe wanted no beggars or idle persons. Dishonesty and female promiscuity was heavily looked down upon. All beggars on the highways, prostitutes, and stragglers shall be arrested. Governors and lieutenants are strictly ordered to enforce these regulations, and the good and faithful subjects invited to denounce the delinquents. He taught his people self-respect by requiring them to appear in the towns dressed in neat clothing. Christophe encouraged honesty by encouraging the severest penalties for theft. He even went so far to have pieces of jewelry planted where they might easily be found. Woe to the Negro who did not immediately report his finding of one of those items and turn it over to the nearest official. So yes, as we can see, in Christophe's kingdom, there was no such thing as unemployment. There was no such thing as women just selling booty in the street. There was no such thing as robbers and beggars and thieves and liars. Because listen, the penalty would be severe if you were caught committing any of these offenses. Let's get back into it. When Christophe came to power, much of the land belonged to the state and was divided into plantations of hundreds of acres, an inheritance from the colonial system. At first, he kept the estates intact and leased the national domain in large blocks to members of the nobility and others who held their land only so long as they enjoyed his favor. To increase productivity, he had the irrigation systems rebuilt, and he gave great care to the raising of sugar. Inspectors were appointed to every district to see what cultivation was maintained on schedule, and under their supervision, production reached a very high level. The Code Rural required that 1/4 of the annual crop be paid to the state in taxes, thus greatly enriching the treasury. On every plantation, 1/4 of the total crop was payable to the workers as wages. In addition, each family was allotted a garden plot where the workers were required to raise food crops for their own personal consumption. So yes, not only was everybody employed, everybody was a landowner, and everybody was self-sufficient. So you would be able to work, pay your taxes to the state, and feed your family self-sufficiently. And if you are very productive, you would be able to amass large amounts of land and also be able to rent it out. So within Christophe's kingdom, like I said, nobody was hungry, nobody was unemployed, nobody was going without. And like I said, medical provision was provided by the state. Everything you needed was provided by the state. Education was free, and nobody needed to prey upon each other, rob each other, or harm each other because everything was already on deck. Everything was already provided. Let's get back into it. Since they received an adequate income, and since on Saturday afternoons and Sundays they were not required to work, they could go to the villages and spend their money as they pleased. Later in his reign, Christophe took advantage of the tranquility we at present enjoy to sell off much of the national domain, to augment the number of property owners, and to give every Haitian, whatever his rank or station in life, a right to purchase land. Special attention was paid to heads of families and to the most laborious and deserving workers of the soil. To prevent a decline in production, however, he provided for the fullest supervision of these new proprietors. Thus, under Christophe, practically every acre of fertile soil was put under cultivation. Knowing that the welfare of Haiti depended primarily upon agriculture, Christophe restored the devastated plantations at the earliest possible moment and maintained production by the most efficient means. A benevolent dictatorship was a result. He ruled with absolute authority and punished without pity those who attempted to stop his plans. Nevertheless, under his guiding hand, his country reached prosperity. Christophe had a passion for monuments, and he built a number of large palaces, of which his favorite was the Sanssouci. From his windows, he could see the ocean far in the distance and the wide expanse of the Plaine du Nord, lying nestled among the mountains 12 miles inland from Cap Haïtien, which he renamed Cap Henri. And rising 4 stories above a majestic staircase, it dominated the whole countryside. Emphasis was placed on the spaciousness and grandeur, both in the large apartments within and in the stately gardens surrounding the palace. Here indeed was the proper setting for the levees and the state affairs which Christophe demanded of his people, and it became the center of life in the kingdom. Sanssouci, perhaps the most magnificent building in all of the Caribbean, now lies in ruins. Its rich tapestries and paintings, its extensive library, and its exquisite furnishings have long disappeared. Tropical storms have discolored its once painted walls, and the mountain stream, which underneath the large reception rooms brought coolness to a perspiring court, has eaten its way into the foundations. Yet even today, the gaunt and lonely structure is an imposing and impressive sight. Among the white people who came to Christophe's royal court were 2 women from Philadelphia. They were to have charge of the education of his 2 daughters. We embarked, recounts one of the teachers, at Philadelphia, and in 15 days reached Cap Français. We landed much debilitated by illnesses we had suffered during the passage. The queen on their arrival sent for them to call at Sanssouci, but let them tell their own story. At the appointed time, an elegant, London-built chariot, drawn by 4 greys, was sent to convey us to the palace. We set off one of those soft and beautiful mornings, and during the ride, we thought nothing comparable to the beauty, the freshness, and the loveliness of a morning excursion in a tropical winter. We were accompanied by Baron Dupuis, who amused us as much by his questions and remarks regarding America, where he had lived some time, as he pleased us by his polite and gentlemanly manners. On reaching the palace, we alighted at Prince John, the king's nephew. His wife was also awaiting our arrival, by whom we were ushered into a saloon where we were immediately surrounded by a crowd of visitors. Some of them had never seen white women before. About 11 o'clock, we were summoned to the palace and conducted into the library, where the Count de Limonade, the secretary for foreign affairs, was waiting for us. After handing us chairs, he remained some minutes in silence. In about a quarter of an hour, we heard a bustle in the adjoining passage. The door opened, and Christophe, preceded by 6 young Negroes as page boys and accompanied by some of his nobles, made his appearance. We rose and made a profound salute. He desired us to be seated. We knew better and stood while he remained, not in the least intimidated by the appearance or manners of his sable majesty. He said little to us, but turning to Baron Dupuis, he questioned if our house at the Cap was in readiness, and finding it was not so, he said, "Oh, these ladies can come here and instruct my daughters," and immediately left us to prepare them for our reception. We were now conducted to another part of the palace and shown into a spacious saloon furnished with great magnificence and taste. We were scarcely seated when the large folding doors again opened, and Christophe, with the queen, the prince royal, and the princesses, appeared, dressed most handsomely and with a degree of elegance which we had not expected. The queen was exceedingly obliging and affable. She made kind inquiries respecting our passage and health. She expressed her hope that we should be perfectly happy as long as we should remain with them, said that she assured us that she would always be ready to assist us, and her evident sincerity convinced us that she had a kind and affectionate heart. Her daughters were equally polite and appeared quite pleased at the idea of our coming to reside in the palace. On the whole, we were much pleased and satisfied with the interview. The breakfast hour approaching, we retired to another apartment, where we partook of an elegant déjeuner in company with the king's niece and the officers of the household, black and yellow barons. They were very attentive to us, and the conversation, though on commonplace topics, we thought more interesting than could have been expected. It was 5 weeks before the necessary arrangements were made for our residence at the palace, which time we spent most agreeably in the town, where every possible attention was shown to us. The apartments in the palace, which were at full length furnished, were sufficiently large for our purpose, and as soon as we were comfortably seated, we began instructing our royal students. They studied English, French, composition, and drawing, and the hours we were engaged with them were from between 7 and 8 till 10 in the morning, and from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. The princesses differed much in their abilities and dispositions, yet the progress of both was considerable, and the queen, and we believe the king also, felt perfectly satisfied with our endeavors. We occasionally dined with the queen. Our students also sometimes stopped after hours of instruction for conversation, or we accompanied them to the gardens, but we felt in great measure excluded from society. If we used the carriage which was at our service, we could ride only to a prescribed distance, and we were perpetually annoyed by the guard. If we ventured on a ramble, inquiring who we were and where we were going, the etiquette of the court was intolerably irksome. We had come from America, and the confinement, restraint, and ceremony we had been quite unaccustomed to and could not suffer. We determined at length to resign our charge and to quit the place. But though our stay was shorter than we originally intended, we could never recollect our residence in Haiti but with feelings of deep and lasting interest. So yes, that was the perspective of the white women from America who were, for a short time, the professors of the royal princess and princesses. Obviously, the strict regulations of Christophe's kingdom was not to their liking. Back then in America, white women, I guess they could do whatever they want. And, the strict regulations of a black man, they were just not used to it. It is what it is, baby. It is what it is. Let's get back into it. From the time of his assumption of authority, Christophe not only maintained a large standing army, but attempted to transform his soldiers accustomed to predatory warfare into an orderly fighting force. The morale of an army, he insisted, lay in the respect of the men for their leaders and in their pride in themselves, and he knew that the scrupulous observance of military regulations provided the key to the efficient coordination of his troops. Thus, he imposed the harshest discipline on his men. They were drilled constantly, carried out difficult maneuvers, and were frequently required to participate in formal reviews. On the parade ground, the most meticulous attention to the details of dress, posture, and formality was required. The uniforms of the officers were extravagantly colorful. Christophe took pleasure in reviewing his troops, and his giant stature, his manly and dignified bearing, and his powerful personality lent impressiveness to the scene. He created a noteworthy military machine, and during the last years of his reign, his army won the approval of visiting Britishmen, for whom he was proud to exhibit the discipline and skill of the Negro soldiers. Realizing that he could not entirely trust the maintenance of order and the preservation of his power to the Negro troops who had witnessed his rise to supreme authority, who had seen the fall of Dessalines through intrigue among the generals, and whose loyalty was often fickle and insecure, Christophe made arrangements with foreign merchants for the transportation of 20,000 Negroes from Africa. Carefully selected and given the most rigorous training, they not only served as his bodyguard, but acted as an internal police force, and to them was assigned the surveillance of the entire kingdom. Placed in every village and district, they provided him with an intimate knowledge of the actual condition of his realm and gave him a potent means of imposing his will upon the people. The royal Dahomets, so named from the area in Africa from which they came from, the kingdom of Dahomey, were well clothed and cultured, better trained, more efficient, and disciplined to a higher degree than regular Haitian soldiers. They were personally responsible to the king and enjoyed royal favor. Now let's stop it right there. Listen, what did I tell y'all about the kingdom of Dahomey? The connection between the kingdom of Dahomey and the kingdom of Haiti, the Republic of Haiti. Over 20,000 soldiers from the kingdom of Dahomey came to Haiti on the request of Christophe. Christophe got in contact with the Dahomey king, and then they arranged for 20,000 Dahomey soldiers to come to Haiti, of which they remain. So not only were Dahomey dominant during the Haitian Revolution, Christophe imported over 20,000 more to serve as a police force and royal bodyguards, because though he trained his native Haitian soldiers to a T, he did not trust them because he knew Dessalines was assassinated by his own men. So Christophe needed a buffer between himself and the military. He needed someone who did not have ulterior motives and hidden ambitions. Over 20,000. If that's not Pan-Africanism, what is? If that's not Pan-Africanism, what is? Let's get back into it. Through then, he was able to maintain order, to suppress crime, and to require obedience to the exacting provisions. From Dessalines, Christophe inherited a plan for the defense of the island against French aggression. He too intended to offer no resistance along the coast, to burn the towns as they were abandoned, and to meet the armies of the invader deep in the mountains of the island. Under Dessalines, indeed, he had begun the construction of a great fortress atop a large mountain, a mountain which rose 3,000 feet in the sky. He made the completion of the citadel his greatest ambition. Christophe's ambition had become an obsession. Slowly, a great citadel, known in Christophe's time as the Citadel Henri, rose to meet the sky. It is today, despite the action of time and neglect, a wondrous thing to behold. As the traveler exploring the island toils up the mountain, he can see nothing except a thick, overhanging jungle. But as he reaches the top of the trail, all at once, the mighty fortress, breathtaking and awesome in its sheer immensity, bursts into view. Pointing north, it rises in solemn strength to a height of 130 feet. In our line, it resembles the hull of a ship, with the massive prow that seems to grow out of the mountain on which it rests. Inside, the citadel is a maze of passages and galleries. Deep down below are murky dungeons where Christophe incarcerated those who dared to defy him. There are supply rooms still filled with gunpowder still to this day. In the midst of the courtyard stands a little rectangular building, the tomb of Christophe. To one side are the apartments of the king, to the other are the military barracks, capable, it is said, of housing over 10,000 soldiers. Today, the cannons lie useless on their rotten wooden carriages, while all around are piles of cannonballs. There are vast cisterns built to store the rainwater for use in case of a siege. The walls of this fortress are from 20 to 30 feet thick, and from the flat roof, if that day happen to be clear, the island of Tortuga and the stretches of the ocean can be seen in the distance, while nearer, at the hands are the rolling plains and the woodlands and the countryside dotted with plantations. The citadel was never used for military purposes, and Christophe did not live to bring it to completion. An earthquake had caused an ugly rent. Now moss and foliage linen and rich orchard and the mimosa blossoms rot the ravages of time. Even in ruin, however, it rivals the Egyptian pyramids and offers a testimony to its creator. Age may crumble its walls, but the citadel, born of suffering and hope, is a living symbol of the magnificent dream of King Henri Christophe. In order to develop commerce with the outside world, Christophe had sent, as early as November 1806, a manifesto to all nations. Wishing to remove the distrust which the policies of Dessalines had produced, he promised to remove the stupid restrictions of his predecessor. The storehouses, he pointed out, were overflowing with the rich produce of the island, and he indicated the mutual advantages in the exchange of goods. He offered, too, a protection to foreign merchants entering his ports or desiring to settle in Haiti. Thus, he initiated commercial relations with trading nations, and before long, Cap Henri was a busy center of activity and trade. Christophe's favorite customer was Great Britain, and he did everything in his power to create friendly relations with them. The government of Haiti declares to those powers who have colonies in its neighborhood its fixed determination to give no disturbance to the government of these colonies. The people of Haiti make no conquest out of their own island, and they confine themselves to the preservation of their own territory. This was the statement made by Christophe to all neutral nations. Almost at once, an opportunity arose to demonstrate his goodwill. In southern Haiti, a plot was brewing for an uprising among the slaves in Jamaica. When Christophe heard of the conspiracy, he professed a burning zeal to defeat the mediated movement and immediately arrested some of the accomplices. In recognition of his action, the British ministry gave an order giving important commercial advantages to Henri Christophe and directing English ships to trade at all Haitian ports under his authority. In 1808 and 1809, Christophe cooperated with the English, who launched an attack against the French in Spanish Santo Domingo by sending arms to the Spanish insurgents. And in 1810, English naval units helped him to wipe out a pocket of resistance at Mole Saint-Nicolas. 2 years later, when some of his sailors in Christophe's infant navy revolted and went over to Petro's government, the crew of one of the ships was foolish enough to offer battle against an English warship under Sir James Lucas Yeo. Quickly subdued by the superior English fire, the revolting seamen were made prisoners and returned to Christophe for punishment. Christophe and the British, as one historian remarks, were almost in open alliance. Christophe did not fare so well in his commercial dealings with the United States. During the reign of Dessalines, the American Congress had passed a law in February 1806 prohibiting trade with any portion of Hispaniola not acknowledging French authority. You see how the white boys do? If we don't bow down to the French, the Americans said we ain't doing business with you unless you get on your knees and start sucking off the French again. Man, I can't stand these American white boys, man. Anyways, let's get back into it. In 1806, prohibiting trade with any portion of Hispaniola, not acknowledging French authority, partly to assuage Napoleon, who demanded in no uncertain terms that all commerce with Negroes be stopped, and partly because of the effect an independent Negro state might have on the slave system in the United States. This act was renewed in 1807 and continued until 1809. At the onset of his career, therefore, Christophe had no official trade with the United States. Even when commerce was renewed in 1810, there was no great increase in trade, for American merchants found that Englishmen were enjoying a 50% reduction in duties. Nor did Christophe improve matters. In 1811, finding himself unable to recover large sums entrusted to the firm of Von Caff and Brune of Baltimore for the purchase of goods, he seized properties valued at about $125,000 from American traders in Haiti, and in answer to their protests, told them to obtain redress from the Baltimore firm if they were able. Thus, his American commerce dwindled. Christophe made good his promise to protect foreign merchants residing in Haiti, most of them who lived in Cap Henri. They were given every encouragement and courtesy. An English naval officer who visited Christophe's kingdom in 1814 received the most favorable reports from the white residents. We conceive, they told him, our persons and property under the protection of the king to be as safe as in Kingston unless the French land an expedition. Nor could I hear one act of injustice that could fairly be attributed to the king. He is sharp in his dealings and in making them fulfill their contracts. But it is almost needless to mention how far a merchant adventurer will go for gain and how necessary it is to watch them. A number of distinguished foreigners visited Haiti, and Christophe was always honored to have them attend his weekly levees at the palace. He received them in a gracious and polished manner. Among the Englishmen who always came to visit him was Sir Home Riggs Popham, commander-in-chief on the Jamaica station. He was shown the utmost hospitality. A luxurious house at Cap Henri was placed at his service, and every Haitian, from the king to the lowliest subject, was at service for his comfort. He was invited to inspect the schools and hospitals and professed himself amazed at the proficiency of the students and the high level of medical care. Christophe received them in royal splendor at the Sanssouci Palace, regaled him at a sumptuous banquet, and proudly marched the royal troops in formal review before him. Sir Poffin was greatly impressed with what he saw. Christophe's purpose in establishing amicable relations with the English was not merely to gain economic advantages and to win foreign approval of his kingdom, but also to further his own self-education. Just as he had sought the advice of mulattoes and Negroes alike in the administration of his state, he went out of his way to form intimate relationships with the whites, painfully conscious of his own limitations. It is said that he regretted most his lack of education. He delighted in conversation with white men. Perhaps his closest white friend was Duncan Stewart, a Scotsman who served not only as his personal physician, but as his intimate advisor as well. Another friend was M.J. Moore of London, a mathematician. Often the three men sat for hours talking over the affairs of the world and the plans Christophe had made for the civilization of Haiti. Although Christophe made every effort to win foreign approval of his government, he did nevertheless impose very severe restrictions upon all foreigners. Upon arrival in Haiti, all persons were required to surrender any letters or papers in their possession for examination by the government officials. No foreign resident, moreover, was allowed to go more than 3 miles into the interior, and late in Christophe's reign, it was discovered that foreigners were not after sundown to leave the vicinity of the capital. On one occasion, 2 Englishmen decided to ascend the mountain not far from the town. They were stopped by the soldiers and spent the night in jail. The next day, they were brought before Christophe, and though they had the audacity to tell him that they considered the restrictions to be absurd, he dismissed them with the stern warning to beware how they treated in future that or any other regulation which he brought proper to establish. Christophe was particularly careful to guard the secrets of the citadel, and no foreigner ever approached the fortress. The whites were not the only ones who felt the severity of Christophe's demands. Ever vigilant, he seemed to be everywhere and personally to supervise every activity in his kingdom. He was accustomed to wander about his domain accompanied by a single attendant and decorated with only the star of the order of King Henri to distinguish him from the subjects. A laborer careless in his work or idling when he was supposed to be working was likely to find the king standing over him, and direct punishment often followed. Nor did a grandiose title or a glittering uniform make a man immune to Christophe's displeasure. Once, Richard, Duc de Limonade, the military governor of Cap Henri, was charged with an important commission. In carrying out his orders, he found it expedient to vary the details. Though he performed his duty, Christophe was highly incensed and condemned the Duke to hard labor for several months. However much the Haitians disliked the rigid discipline imposed upon them and resented their loss of personal liberty, the will of their unrelenting king prevailed, and under his guiding hand, the country prospered. And under his guiding hand, produce of every kind poured in from the plantations. A small navy patrolled the coast, and a profitable commerce was developed with other nations. The state coffers were filled to overflowing, the annual revenue amounting to over $3.5 million per year in the early 1800s. The nobility and landowners became wealthy, and want and hunger disappeared. The rural laborers enjoying 1/4 of the crops. The schools flourished. A printing press established. A theater was built, and indeed, in prosperity and in grandeur, the kingdom of Haiti was beginning to rival the old colony of French Saint-Domingue. In Pencho's territory, however, in the south, on the other hand, the public treasury was empty. The inhabitants had their heart's content of freedom, but were spared the forced labor of Christophe's subjects, but there was a complete neglect to the public welfare. The soldiers and the population were ragged. Petty theft and crime were enormous. The plantations were untilled. If the tyrannical policies of Christophe were too harsh for the population to endure, Petron's laxness left his people prey to indolence, crime, and disorder. We're going to stop part 2 right there. As we can see, King Christophe, the greatest Haitian to ever live, made us rise to our greatest level of prosperity and success. And ever since his death, we have never bounced back yet. Part 3 coming soon. This was part 2, the most powerful black man of the last 500 years. And I'm gone. Peace.
Reincarnated, I'm back in original fashion. I left on a horse and came back in that ass, and I left with abundance and came back to famine. We used to be pyramids, now we be rapping. Look how the mighty have fallen. Used to be running, now we be walking. When you be cooning, that's when they applauded. Selling your soul, your sons and your daughter. Gotta come up in this shit, they stuck in the mix. Really, my heart it be breaking. That's why I'm stacking that paper and handle my business. Pass it down in generation. Talking about money and power and building a nation. That's a deadly combination. Never be watching the TV, they pushing agendas, falsifying information. Know they got malice intentions. Step in the room and I'm feeling the tension. Enemy watching, he blocking my vision. Pay for the check cause I need my redemption. Building my kingdom, I need it protected. Ready for war like a young Money Congo. Chicago. Never decided the team is the motto. Up in the crib and I'm whipping up waffles. Up in the crib and I'm smoking gelato. I'm chilling, I'm taking my pain and make it ambition. I'm blessed by the gods, but I ain't religious. I came for the power, they came for the bitch. They making no hourly wage, I got business. This shit is an art, and they could never be taught. Selling my soul, I can never be bought. Play with my money, I see you ain't caught. Run to the check and I do it for sport. Babylon falling, I go to the source. Packing my luggage and go overseas. Shorty be with me and she so elite. Shorty be chocolate, I'm calling her Hershey. Secret intelligence probably gon' murk me. Don't fuck with brands, cause nigga I'm Haitian. Say the wrong shit and get smack in their faces.